This lesson is on solving linear equations. The goal is to solve linear equations. What you should understand by the end of this lesson is that you can use properties of equality and inverse operations to solve equations. Alright, on an inverse operation, it means for any mathematical operation there is an inverse operation, and we consider that using the opposite. So when we think about addition, the opposite is subtraction. Opposite of subtracting is adding. Opposite of multiply is divide. Opposite of divide is multiply. That's what we're talking about as being an inverse operation. When we talk about equality in an equation, we're talking about if you do it to one side of the equal sign, you do it to the other side of the equal sign. So here are the 5 steps in solving almost any equation. You can use one of the steps, or all of the steps, or 2 of the steps. It just depends on the equation. You need to go back and look at all of these steps. If you're not really good at solving equations, go back every time, start at step 1, see if you need it, go down each step over and over again until you get really good at it. Once you get really good at it, you don't need to keep looking at all of these steps. But let's take a look at the 5 steps. First step is to get rid of all parentheses by using the distributive property. Second step is to combine any like terms that are on the same side of the equal sign. Step 3, get all the variables on one side of the equal sign by using the inverse operation. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a minute. Step 4 is get all the numbers on the other side of the equal sign by using the inverse operation. And step 5 is normally where we're concerned. We're going to divide the number, both sides, by the number in front of the variable. And we're going to divide both sides by that number in front of the variable. So let's take a look at some of these. I'm going to do one for you. You're going to do some practice problems. And then I'm going to show you another kind with the parentheses, and you're going to do some practice problems. Alright, here's one, a simple one. So we aren't going to have very many steps, but let's take a look at it. First of all, there are no parentheses, so I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to combine like terms on either side. I do have variables on both sides of the equal sign. So I always, for me, the easiest way to do it is to look for the smallest number and then use the inverse operation to get rid of them. So I'm going to look at my variables. I have -4 and I have -6. Which one is smaller? -6 is smaller, so I'm going to use the inverse operation. The opposite of a -6 is a +6. So I'm going to use plus 6n and add 6n to both sides. That cancels out. So on the left side of the equal sign, I have 14, -4 plus 6 is a +2, and on the other side I have -12. Make sure that you bring the negative sign down with the 12. Step 4 is to get all of the numbers, not your variable, but the numbers on the other side by using the inverse operation. So I have a 14 on the left. I need to get rid of it by using the inverse operation. Well, it's positive. The opposite of a positive is a negative. So I'm going to subtract 14 from both sides. I now have 2n equals -26. The final step is always to divide both sides by the number in front of the variable. So when I divide both sides by 2, I get n equals -13. Now, if you go back up and you plug in -13 into the original equation every place you see n, put both sides into your calculator, you would see that both sides equal 66. So because both sides are the same, that means negative 13 was the right answer. Now it's your turn. Here's practice problem 1. Be sure you show you the steps of your problem and check your answer. Here's practice number 2. Here's practice number 3. Here's practice number 4. Alright, this problem is a little more involved. It's going to use all 5 steps. So the first thing we're going to do is to get rid of the parentheses by using the distributive property. Now I hope you remember when you use the distributive property, you multiply what's outside the parenthesis times both things inside. So I'm going to take 3 times both of those numbers, and on this side I'm going to take 2 times both of those numbers. So on the left I end up with 18.5v plus 34.4v plus 3.06. It equals negative 3.3v plus 1992. Now the next step is we're going to combine like terms, and we have those are like terms, so we're going to add them together. And when I add those two together, I get 52.9v. I get plus 3.06 equals negative 3.3v plus 1992. Now I find my smaller number of variables and use the inverse operation. My smaller number is negative 3.3. So I'm going to add 3.3 to both sides. When I do that, I have 1992 over here, and I have 56.2v plus my 3.06. Now I need to get rid of the positive 3.06. I use the inverse operation. I subtract it from both sides, which leaves me 56.2v equals 16.86. The final step is to divide both sides by 56.2. Which will eventually give me v equals 0.3. Now when I plug 0.3 back into the original equation over here on both sides, I end up with both sides equals 18.93. And because both sides equal the same number, 0.3 has to be the correct value of v. Now you're going to do a couple problems. If this is confusing, go back and look at what I did again. Here's your practice 5. And your final practice for lesson 1.2 is practice 6. And so now you can mark yourself where you are on the scale of understanding. Are you a 1, 2, 3, or 4? Where do you feel you are at the end of this lesson? Okay, that's the end of this lesson. You can go get on your IXL lesson and you can stop at a 90 and take your actual grade, or you can go on and master it and make a 100 for the lesson. Good luck!